I'm from Hope for the Future, and I'll talk a little bit more about who we are. But yeah, really excited to be here today to do this session. So if you just bear with me.
Lily, I think you have to make him a co-host. I'm unable to do that.
So can everyone see my screen now? Great. And I'm just checking it's just one screen you can see that says Pitch Perfect on it.
That's the one.
Amazing. Great. Well, let's get started then. So yeah, thank you for being here for the second session. This session is called Pitch Perfect, and it's about getting the most out of connecting with your MPs and candidates. So giving you the tools to feel equipped to have conversations and specifically framed around the event that is being hosted, where you will meet politicians and be able to really convincingly put across what you want to talk about and why. That's me on the right. And that's Ollie on the left. I'm going to be your trainer today from Hope for the Future. Ollie is going to be the expert on all things I can't talk about. So he'll be dropping in and out as well to give his insight and maybe answer some of your questions. My email addresses are there. That will all get sent out to you later. So don't worry about noting that down just yet. I'll just run through who Hope for the Future are a little bit, and then we'll get cracking. So we are a national charity. We're based in Sheffield. And we've been doing this for over 10 years now. And what we do is we support people to have better conversations with local politicians, to get them to engage, to listen, and then to act on climate policy. We don't specifically push our own policies. We work with communities and individuals to hear what they care about when it comes to climate change and other issues, and then develop them into effective relationships with politicians. And yeah, we've been doing this for over 10 years now, and we've learned that the impact works. More than 90% of the meetings that we support lead to at least one action from the MP or politician on climate. So we think that this approach works. We do this through a whole range of ways. Today is going to be training, but we also offer support, more one-on-one support putting on events, setting up the meeting, being in the meeting, lots of different stuff. And I'll talk a little bit more about our support later. You can find out more about us through scanning that QR code if you're really tech savvy, or you can just visit our website at hftf.org. So just a couple housekeeping rules. You've already done a session and I'm sure you were all great, but we just ask that everyone's respectful. There'll be plenty of times for questions in this session. What I'd ask is that if you have a question while I'm talking, if you just pop it in the chat, and then I'll get to it at the end of the section. And there will be a chunk of time for questions at the end if you prefer to say them, to unmute yourself and have that discussion there. We will send a copy of these slides over. Feel free to take notes, but there's no need to. If you just want to sit and listen, that's great too. There will be some feedback that Sustain will be doing, but there'll be a couple of questions there that are focused on us. It's really great if you can fill that out. It just allows us to know what we've done well, but also what we can do better in the future. And as you know, part of this session is recorded. The bit at the end where you're allowed to ask verbal questions won't be recorded if you're not comfortable with that. So these are what we're hoping to get through today. There's a lot of content, but hopefully we'll get through it all. We will get through it all. I'm going to talk a little bit about who your politician is, what a local MP does and is, and what the general election does as an opportunity rather than a hindrance. A little bit about Hope for the Future's relationship-based approach, which underpins the kind of strategy we use, and the four kind of main bits of that, which are research, common ground, smart asks, and then actually meeting with your MP. And in that section, we'll talk about specifically meeting with your MP at this event that's happening. And then I'll touch on some of the support we can offer. So without further ado, and those are the outcomes there, which I'll just give you a second to read through, and then we'll get cracking. Great. So here we go. I'm going to run through a little bit about politics in the UK and the general election. Some of you may know some of this, but it's always great to refresh our memory, and some of you may not know it. So what is an MP? MP is the shorthand for Member of Parliament. They represent people who live in their constituency in the UK, so across all four nations of the UK. There's 650 MPs, meaning there's 650 constituencies, and they're elected in a first-past-the-post system, which means anyone who votes, anyone can vote in that constituency, and the candidate that gets the most votes becomes the MP, regardless of who was second, third, fourth, or fifth. Almost all MPs in today's system are part of a political party. So Labour, Conservative, Lib Dems, Greens, SNP, and a whole bunch more. But most people are not independents in Westminster. And the party with the most MPs usually forms the government, and the government is where they have the mandate to act on what they think the public want and what they want the country to look like. Members of Parliament are often the most talked about elected representative, but there are loads more. There's councillors, there's members of Scottish Parliament and of the Senate, and there's mayors, regional mayors, which are becoming more and more common, especially in England. This approach that we're talking about today is effective with other types of politicians, but we're focusing specifically today on MPs and on PPCs. So a PPC is a parliamentary prospective candidate or a prospective parliamentary candidate. I never get it the right way around. This is someone who wants to become the MP. So they are standing at the next general election to be the MP. And so people can vote for them to become that. You get PPCs from a whole range of groups. You do get independent parliamentary candidates, but then you also get them for most parties. With the larger parties, so Labour, Conservative and Lib Dem, they usually field a candidate in every constituency in the UK. Smaller parties will maybe focus on a region or a demographic where they think they have a better chance of bringing forward a member. Just an interesting thing to note, once a general election is called, there's a period called purdah. Your MP stops being an MP. So they leave their office in Westminster and they become a parliamentary candidate, just like all the other candidates. So they can't do the things that an MP can do, and they are just another candidate. And that's to stop them having an unfair advantage, excuse me, in the election campaign. Just an interesting thing to note. So just a little bit about being a local politician. It's a really high profile job, especially today. There's news and social media. People are very aware of what MPs do and also what they don't do. Politicians, we say that they kind of have a lot of knowledge, but not a lot of detail in specific areas. So they have to know a little about a lot, which is good. They're a generalist, but also frustrating when you want to be specific about something. We sometimes talk about MPs or politicians as the GP of the political world. So they're really good at diagnosing and going over to find new information, and they hold lots of information, but at a surface level. There are lots of things that elected representatives can do, but there are also limits on what they can do too. If you went to an MP and said, I want you to fix this massive global issue all by yourself, they won't be able to do that. But what they can be is be one of the people in that process that is leading to change. A lot of local politicians, because they are usually part of a political party, are constrained by or an advocate of their political party line and their policy. So that means that they are usually skeptical to go against party line unless there's a really good reason to do so. And we'll talk about finding that good reason later. MPs may not be from the local area, same with candidates, but they will usually move to the local area once they're elected, or if they're really keen to win, once they become the candidate. So there is an expectation that your local politician knows a lot about the local area and is invested in the local area. There's a huge number of reasons why you should meet with your local politicians, but at Hope for the Future, the main reason we push it is that meeting with local politicians about climate change issues strengthens their mandate to act. So if they know that an issue is important at a local level, and it can be climate change, it can be anything really, it strengthens their mandate to act. As we come up to a general election, MPs and candidates want to know what issues are vote winners and what issues are vote losers at a local level. And so the more you can be one of the people who's putting forward a vote winning issue, showing that there's a local movement and consensus on the issue, the more likely it is that that candidate or politician is going to take that forward as a policy, because it makes them likely to win the election. And lastly, it builds a relationship with them. The more you meet with them and engage with them, the more influence you gain over them. At the beginning, it might be quite small, but as a relationship builds, there's a level of trust and a level of communication that means you have influence on that individual. So I'm just going to give an encouragement and then we're going to crack on about the general election. A lot of people this year are feeling quite skeptical because as a general election comes, what's the point of building a relationship with my MP if they're going to be gone in 6 months or however many months it is? And I appreciate that, but I'd like to encourage you that it actually can be a real opportunity. It gives you an opportunity to talk to candidates when they're listening in a way that is specifically unique to the general election. But also you can talk to a wider group of people. So yes, there's your MP, but there's also the candidates in the area. And you might be able to get commitments from one, which leads to commitments from others. There's also a lack of, MPs who are standing down or don't think they're going to win their seat, might really want to do something for the local area in a general election year. And so might be less risk averse, might be more willing to do things they wouldn't normally do, which could benefit you. And equally, even if the MP that you build a relationship with doesn't get re-elected and doesn't go on to do something, if you already have an existing relationship with that MP, then the candidate that takes their place, you can go to and say, I've already had a relationship with this MP. We got on really well. I really want to continue that with you. And it puts a lot of pressure on their potential replacements. So just an encouragement that if done right and framed in the right way, the general election actually is a real opportunity to get through change. So I'm going to talk now about what underpins a Hope for the Future's approach, which is the relationship-based approach. Before I mention that, I just quickly want to say that we're not saying this is the only way to engage on action. There's a huge variety of things from direct action to protest to using social media or legal or letters. There's a huge variety, but what we're offering is a tool in a toolkit that we think is really effective and really suits certain people and their approaches. So please don't think we're saying that this is the only way to engage with politicians. But that said, what we mean by relationship building is that you go into these conversations with politicians with a focus on your values and your goals, but also a focus on the relationship that you have. And if you can balance those two well, in the middle, we think sits meaningful collaboration. So you're having conversations where you're still being honest about what you care about and why it matters, but you're also trying to respect the person you're talking to, listen to their needs and wants as well, and be a bit concerned with that relationship being positive. When it's kind of the opposite to what you see more on social media or maybe question time and things like that, where it's the audience shouting at the politician shouting back, and both getting very defensive. So we think using a relationship is a really good tool for meaningful collaboration. I'm going to touch a little bit on those defensive and offensive behaviors, not offensive, but offensive. So the relationship-based approach is designed to reduce the behaviors from your politician, but also from yourself. It means that the conversations you have are more likely to lead to positive action and also a better understanding of how your politician thinks and from your politician's perspective, how you think. So on the left there, we've got some classic political defensive behaviors, sticking to the party line, using that as an excuse to not get involved, trying to control the conversation, moving it into areas they feel they can talk on more effectively, even if that's not what you want to talk about. Being inattentive or rude. We've had politicians who take a phone call halfway through just to leave a meeting, refusing concrete answers. So just not saying yes, not saying no, but not saying yes either. And so you're left with kind of a murky understanding of what they actually think. And on the opposite end, overcommitting, saying, absolutely, I'll do that for sure, even though it's not something they're able to do, which is not actually useful either. And then on the other side, we've got behaviors from constituents that can sometimes create conflict. So getting really annoyed by a politician, politicians can be really annoying, but by showing irritation and frustration, it creates defensive behaviors in that politician. Equally, you might try to control the conversation. They might have a really useful tangential point or want to talk to you about their experience personally or politically. And if you're unwilling to listen to that and just want to say what you say, they're not going to feel listened to either. Focusing on what they don't know. So rather than trying to build consensus or build understanding, criticizing them for a lack of information or making them feel uninformed. Even if they are, no one likes to feel like they don't know what they're talking about or humiliated for that. And again, that's more likely to make them defensive. Equally, refusing to move on from issues that are controversial, that create tension in the room. This doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about them if they're important to you, but if you keep on talking about something that's leading to shutdown and you won't move on from that, it shows the politician that you're not necessarily willing to have constructive conversation, even if the issue is important. Attacking a political party, either the political party they are or the political party they aren't. If you're attacking the party they are, of course they're going to get defensive, right? Because even if you don't agree with that party, they're passionate and they love that party. That's why they stand for it. So they're going to get really defensive and feel attacked personally. And equally, if you're attacking other parties, it gives them an ability to create quite a toxic environment where all they do is blame other politicians rather than saying what they would do and demanding accusations, which we'll come to later. But hopefully that gives you an idea of a couple things that you can try and avoid, but also notice in a politician. Effectively, what it boils down to is if the politician feels overly criticised and not listened to, they're more likely to hold back, to put up those kind of media training, boring political answers that don't get you anywhere and don't get them anywhere either. So just something to be thinking about when you're getting ready to have those conversations. So the importance of research is the kind of next step in, well, the first step, I suppose, in the relationship-based approach. And what it basically is that knowledge is power. And the more you know about a politician, MP, or a candidate, the better the conversation you will have because you know what they care about, you know what they're interested in, what they like, what they don't like, and you can use that to your advantage. If you think about the relationships you have personally, the people you know best, you have the most fruitful conversations with, and you can potentially be more critical or more open and more honest when you both feel like you know each other and you're comfortable in that environment. So this is a quote we like to use: designing a presentation without your audience in mind is like writing a love letter and addressing it to whom it may concern. And the premise behind that is exactly that. If you go into an MP meeting and just have the complete wrong tone, it's all general, it doesn't target them, it's not going to resonate and it's not going to have an impact. And so based on that, you need to know your audience and you need to make it personal. Politicians are people too. They have interests, passions and motivations, both political and personal. They might be really passionate about the local football team. They might really care about transportation, but they have these things. The more of them that you know, the more avenues you have to get them on side with the issues you care about and get you to stand out. MPs get thousands of emails. This says hundreds, but I think you could go to thousands weekly from all sorts of people. And unfortunately, they just do not have the time to read them all. But if you can stand out because you talk about something they really care about, you talk about a really important local issue or something like that, it builds you as a person that they remember, they recognize, and it builds a relationship from a positive start point. So that's a quote from Robert Halfon MP, who basically says, make it personal and make it local. And again, it reduces defensive behaviors. The more you know them as a person and how you think they might react to certain ways of talking or certain topics of conversation, the more you know where those kind of positive pressure points are. So it's really important to research a politician, and there's loads of ways to research them. You guys might have some that are not here. Please feel free to pop them in the chat for other people to benefit from. But these are just a couple that we really recommend. Some of the ones at the bottom there, YouTube, word of mouth, local news, are maybe a little bit where you would start, but they're really useful. YouTube often has their maiden speeches on, which is where they basically set out what they think is important to the local area. And so by using those tools, you can say, well, this is what you said mattered, and here's how I want you to do it. Word of mouth, what you've heard in the local area. Equally, local news gives that kind of more local flavor, which is really helpful. What they've said on their website is generally quite formal but helpful. And then what they say on the social media is generally a bit more relaxed. It gives you a bit of an idea of the person behind the politician, which is really useful. The top two you may be a bit less familiar with. So They Work For You is a website that collates politicians' voting records and puts them into a structure of categories. So Angela Rayner is more likely to vote for than against on this issue, on this issue, on this issue. It's not perfect, especially with new politicians, and I'd encourage you to delve into it a little bit more because it does sometimes get it wrong. But it's a useful starting point to wrap your head around how they vote. And then Hansard is the official parliamentary record. So anything that an MP, an elected MP, has said in the Commons, in select committees, in debates, anything they've said publicly in Parliament is recorded there. The way they voted, questions they've submitted, answers they've received. And so that's a really useful place to get exactly what they've said, and has some quite powerful tools for summarizing by detail and information. So I would really encourage you to use all of those tools and any more that you potentially have at your disposal. Wikipedia is also a great tool for finding out a little bit about the politician and their upbringing. So we're just going to talk a little bit about what you need to know from research. I'm not going to go through these. I just want you to know that they're there if you're struggling to find things out. So some questions you might want to be asking about what they've said on climate, on healthy food, food in schools, sustainable food places more widely. What questions have they submitted? Equally, what they have, what you might already know about them based on local knowledge. So that's quite a useful tool if you want to go back to later, if you're struggling with what you should be looking for in research. These are very specific to the issue. What's also really important is that, as I've said, you try and find out a little bit about the person behind the politician, whether that's what their interests are, where they went to university, where they grew up. Was it rural? Was it urban? Was it in the constituency? Was it somewhere else? Things like that are really useful to know. An example I like to talk about here is a politician we worked with right up in the top of Scotland. And at first, his group thought that he was just really rubbish at being able to attend meetings. They thought he was trying to avoid them. And then they realized that he had to go down to London on the sleeper train every Sunday night and then back up on Wednesday. So he was exhausted on Thursday, and then he was only in the constituency Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning. And that was because he had to be in Parliament Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But because he was so far away, they were losing time with him, which was frustrating for them. But then they realized it was also frustrating for him. And so knowing that and being aware of that detail really allows you to build a better relationship. We're not saying that you have to bend over backwards for your politician. You're a person too, and they should value your time as well. We're just saying that the more you know, the better. Again, I'm going to talk about the general election. You might be able to tell, but I think it's a really good opportunity. But some things you will want to know are if they're campaigning for re-election, if they aren't, who is in their party, how safe is the seat? What are the likelihoods that it's going to flip? Does it usually flip, or would this be the first time it's ever done so? And who is their strongest opposition? It might be two, but usually in most parties today, you can see. A useful tool here is called the electoral calculus, and it basically has an algorithm for suggesting who's going to win every seat in the UK. Knowing who the opposition is and potentially thinking about building a relationship with them now is something we really encourage at the moment. I'm just going to take a pause there and check through the chat to see if there's any questions.
I've been going through the chat, Alfie.
Oh, great.
But do speak out if there are anything else that I might have missed, folks.
Yeah, please do put anything in. Otherwise, I might just continue on and leave Oliver doing that because he's doing such a much better job than I would be doing. But yeah, please do continue to put them in, guys, or just comments as well, or advice you have for other people. It's all useful knowledge. Right, so I'm going to crack on then and talk about common ground. So you've tried to understand who your politician is, you've found out a little bit about them, but now you need to find a way to connect that to what you care about. So this is basically the sliver, which might be massive or might be tiny, between the politician's interests and your interests. We have never worked with a group in 10 years that hasn't been able to find an element of common ground with a politician. Sometimes it's as small as they both go to the same pub, or they both really like swimming. Sometimes it's as big as they're both really, really, really passionate about a specific climate issue. But I would encourage you that there almost always is some common ground. I'm going to give a short case study here, which is a guy called Alex Chalk. He's the MP for Cheltenham. He was kind of the traditional problem, I suppose, for a little while. We had a group who were really passionate about climate, but were just not getting anywhere with him. He was just parroting the party line, very disengaged, very sort of, we already do more than any country in Europe, which was a party line in the 2019 election. And so, yeah, they were really struggling to engage with him. But they kind of took this approach, did some research on Alex, and did some work as a team about what the issues they really cared about were. And they found that there was loads that they cared about and loads that Alex talked about, and they didn't always overlap. You can see on the right there that there is some issues that you might think would link to an environmental group, so single-use plastic or cycling, but they weren't passionate about them. Really important that you don't skirt away from what you're passionate about, but that you focus it in a way that connects to the MP. But they found that solar energy and Cheltenham were really important. That last one, I think, will be true for most of you. The local area is really, really useful. So yeah, so they went to him, they talked about solar energy, and they invited him to speak on a panel about the future of solar energy with some local people and some national experts. And it really moved his position. He became really motivated to talk more about solar. He went into schools and talked about those things. But from solar, he also became more passionate about climate in general, because he became equipped with that knowledge and information that he felt comfortable and excited to explore further. Some of you may know Alex Chalk as the member who put forward the 10-minute bill that became the Environment Act, which created legal requirements on climate change and climate policy that we have to meet as a country. That was an incredible piece of legislation that we are not trying to claim credit for, but what we are saying is that we think the group, and Alex has said that that group were really important in shifting him that way. So just an encouraging case study there for you. So just to think a little bit about you guys now. So what you're passionate about, I put some of those things on the left. That won't be all of the things that you care about. There'll be other ones too. And some of the things that your local politician might be passionate about. I'm not quite sure what's happened to the end of interests there, but that should say political interests. So those are some of the things your local politician will care about, the values of the party they're standing for, their personal passions, which you'll find out in research, their political interests and also ambitions. Do they want to be the next Prime Minister, or are they really, really happy just being a local politician? All really useful things to think about and to know. Yeah, you can't always tell what someone's ambitions are, but if you can get an idea of that, if they've been in power for 10 years and never shown any interest in the front benches, you can be pretty sure that their main focus is the local area. And then the things you're passionate about, and then trying to find that common ground. So trying to find a way to connect the issues on the left and the issues on the right where they intersect, if that makes sense. If any of you have some examples of common ground you found with politicians, please do put them in the chat. They might be inspiration for some other people here.
Just to add, Alfie, if I may,
yes.
In terms of working out their ambitions and what kind of politician they are, yeah, I would just urge you to look at the Parallel Parliament website I've just sent, as well as the They Work For You, and you can see what previous roles they might have had and what side of the party they're on. So, for example, if your MP was a shadow minister during the Corbyn years, that's indicative of their politics and their loyalties. They could be shadow minister now. They could have had, yeah. So it's as you know, with politics, it's quite tribal and it's quite cliquey, and a good way of working that out is looking at those websites, looking at those previous ministerial positions or shadow ministerial positions, and work out who's friends with who as much as you can. And you might then be able to work out the likelihood of them becoming a future minister or becoming a future spokesperson based on that. But yeah, this is it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really useful tool. Another one in terms of research that I should have mentioned is just going on an MP's page on the Parliament website that will list any official roles they've ever had. Select committees are a really useful place as well to know where their passions lie. And if they're in a select committees are much less party political, they're cross-party. And so those politicians are often more skilled at building consensus and working across the party lines. It's a little bit complicated to find out if someone is part of a select committee. They don't have to be declared if they attend as a member, but if they're an officer, it will be on their on the Parliament website and that select committee website. If they're just a member, they can choose whether or not they are declared. Select committee chairs tend to be in safe seats as well. Yeah, it's a general assumption because it means they're likely to stick around, but it's not a necessity. But yeah, that's a good point, Vera. So just moving on to give you a little bit more support in finding ways of finding that common ground. We're going to talk about co-benefits. So co-benefits are basically the things that link to the issue you're passionate about, so that link to the goals of sustainable food places, and finding a way to connect those issues to other issues that are really important. The benefit of food as a general area and climate as a general area is they often link really well to other important issues. I'll touch on them a bit later. But this is just an example here on home insulation that kind of shows the point. You might, for example, a local MP or politician might not particularly care about home insulation. They might think it's a vanity project or too expensive or whatever, but they might be really passionate about the local economy. So putting home insulation in is going to bring in good jobs. So that's more money for the local economy. It addresses heat inequality. So if they're really concerned about social justice, poverty and inequality, that's a really key part of home insulation. It's better for health, both physical and mental, keeps people warm, allows them to live in their homes, make a house a home, look after their kids better, etc. Spend less on heating, spend less on food, and reduces reliance on fossil fuels. So those are 4 co-benefits of home insulation: from the environmental, from the health perspective, poverty and inequality, and the economy. And so just an encouragement that the issue you care about will probably have a co-benefit that finds a common ground with a politician. So if you're really struggling for an explicit piece of common ground, maybe breaking down what the co-benefits are of what you care about, and then using that to connect and resonate with the politician. So it would be great to get your thoughts on this. If you've got any off the top of your head, I'll just leave a couple minutes, but if you can think of some co-benefits of the Food Partnership Network that kind of spring to mind, I've got a couple later if we don't come with any, but if anyone's got some ideas, that would be really great, and might help other people as well. So I'll just pause for a couple minutes here. Sorry, that's my news going off. Right, I might move on to some ideas, but do feel free to pop some in the chat if you think of some. Those are just a couple. Some of them are the same, better mental and physical health, but higher educational attainment from students who are fed with good quality food, good green jobs in the local area by investing in sustainable food networks in the UK. Again, reduced poverty and inequality by ensuring everyone has access to the food they need. We've got a go benefit of funding. Yes, you might be able to access funding in the local area. So yeah, there's loads. I would say there's dozens. There may even be more. But yeah, if you can find those co-benefits and link them to something that resonates with the politician, it's a really useful way in. Because often, if it's a bigger concept, like here, for example, education, if they're passionate about education, they will be passionate about all the strings off education that lead to better attainment. And so you can use one of those strings to pull out from that issue and get them really passionate about that. Often when politicians start in government, or in Parliament, I should say, they try and do everything. They try and be a champion of every issue under the sun because they're all so important, right? But once they've been around a few years, they usually develop an expertise in 2 or 3 or 4 key areas, maybe through their ministerial promotions, maybe through local important issues, or maybe just through a charity they meet that really resonates with them. So there's often kind of those specific ones. If you can get sustainable food in early as one of those 4, you could have a champion for the whole journey of their parliamentary career, which could be really, really exciting. it's not that politicians don't care about lots of things, it's just their time is so squeezed that they often develop an expertise in a couple areas. So just an encouragement there. Keeping money local, yeah, the local economy multiplier effects, really good examples. Local food production, yeah, all really good examples, guys. Thank you. And just lastly, kind of similar to co-benefits, but motivations. So there's 4 kind of big things that motivate politicians to get involved in something. A constituency mandate, which we've talked about earlier, being able to say that they're championing, or however you say that word, championing, an issue that's important locally at the national level. This really excites politicians who get into politics because they care about democracy and representation, which is a good chunk of politicians. So that's a really important one. Knowledge and understanding. As I said, they know a little about a lot of things, but they may want to know a lot about that thing. So going in and realizing that they don't necessarily have knowledge there doesn't have to be a barrier. It can be an opportunity to go, well, how can I support you in learning more about how important sustainable food is? What can I give you? What resources can I give you? What conversations can I support between you and members of Sustain? Things like that. My favorite example of this is an MP we worked with. A constituent talked to them about a local animal that was going to go extinct in the local area. And he stopped them and said, I'm really sorry, I just don't know anything about this topic of conservation. And rather than going, well, that's really embarrassing and shameful, I wish you knew more. And they went, that's okay, let me send you a brief that we've put together as the local community. She sent that to him. His assistant gave it to him on the train, which he read on the way down to London. And by that evening, he felt comfortable speaking in a debate about conservation and protecting endangered species. So he went really quickly from legitimately not wanting to talk on the issue because he didn't feel equipped and informed to being informed by the person who was advocating for that. And if you can become one of the people who is at the front of the knowledge and understanding your politician is developing on such important issues, that's a really exciting place to be, because they're going to get their information from somewhere. And if you can make sure that they're getting it from, you know, backed in science, really important, climate positive, local area positive support, then that's really good. Good publicity. This one is maybe a bit less exciting, but MPs love a photo shoot. They want to get elected and they want to be seen to be doing stuff in the local area. So if you can frame what you're doing around an opportunity to look like they're involved in the local area, they will usually bite your hand off. That might be inviting them to an event you're putting on or to a meeting in the local area. Might be inviting them to speak at an event that is happening or asking to meet them at that event. But yeah, if they can cut a ribbon with a big pair of scissors or say that they've been there on their social media, that is really important today. And a legacy of public service. MPs are people too, and politicians are people too, and they want to think that they're making a difference. So when they finally hang that hat up, they want to know that they've had a positive impact, especially for politicians who are coming to the end of their tenure. Leaving a legacy of public service is really important. So if you can connect the issue to something that has a really palpable positive benefit locally, that's normally something that will get them really excited. I just had another co-benefit of a public mandate for specific policy change. Yeah, so that's great. If there's a public mandate, so for something that looks a bit contentious, but you can show that it's important locally, that's a really important thing too.
To touch on Vera's really good point about you having the solutions and answers, that is exactly what the day is about. You know, it's election year, they're going to be getting issues come up on the doorstep. There's a bit of anxiety building with MPs that they're not well equipped, but you have the answers, you have the solutions to so many you know, local food issues and local area issues. So you're in a very advantageous position, and make sure you're going in with that confidence. That the MPs can actually learn so much from you, and just put yourself in that advantageous position. And I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're also the exact kind of people good politicians want to talk to, people who have that information and have a local connection. Politicians would much rather have a conversation with a local group who has that knowledge than they would with a stuffy academic. Not that there's anything wrong with academics. But yeah, we're going to move on now to smart asks. So this is just a strategy, really, a framework for taking those things we've talked about and framing them in a way that makes it harder for a politician to not give you a good answer. And we'll expand on this more when we talk about actually that pitch on the day at that event in Parliament. But SMART asks is an acronym. It doesn't mean clever. It just stands for these 5 things. So making an ask specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timed. And if you can incorporate those 5 elements into the asks that you take to a politician on a day, we think it really boosts your chances of getting positive engagement back out of them. So specific, is it really clear what you're asking about? It's not just, will you do more on food? The politician could then say, sure, I will, and then come back with any definition of better that they think suits them. You want to be really specific on the exact thing you want them to do. Measurable. Can you prove that they've done the thing they've said they will do? If they say, yes, I will do what you've asked, is there a way for you to go back and say, no, you haven't, or yes, you have? So a measurable element. Is it achievable? Is it something that's in the remit of a politician? You can't ask a candidate to vote for something right now because they're not a politician, but you can ask them to vote for something if they get elected or to support a piece of legislation in principle. You can't ask a backbench MP who's in opposition to do something in government, but you can ask them to have conversations with ministers, things like that. It's a bit complicated what politicians can and can't do based on who they are, but we'll get to that in a second. But making sure it's within their remit effectively. Relevant, you could come up with a great ask that they'll say yes to, but if it doesn't link to the issue you care about, there's no point. So it needs to be relevant to what you care about and also relevant to the context we live in today. It needs to be about issues that we are facing currently, not things that are already solved or already have legislation in place. So making sure it's relevant, and then also that means it's something that the politician can get excited about. And timed, is there a way to ensure that you've established a time frame on that question so that you've got a time scale for when you can expect action if they say yes? So I'm just going to jump to an example here. So this is a question that one of our groups we worked with wanted to take to their politician. Will you do more to increase our reliance on renewable energy compared to fossil fuels? It's a really great question. It's really important, and it's obviously something we want to see. But it's actually not very smart because the politician can turn around and say, I absolutely will, yes. And then a year later say, I promise I'll get around to that. I just haven't had the time yet. Or say, well, we actually have done more. Look, we already built more windmills than we ever have this year. And they'll go, well, that's actually not what I meant. Or they'll say, well, we've done this thing. Or equally, they can say, we're already doing so much. I don't know why we need to do more. So it's a great concept, but the actual phrasing of the question doesn't necessarily lead to an effective consequence for you. Here's that question kind of reframed in a smarter way. They don't always have to be this much longer. This is just an example. There's ways to condense them if that's something you're concerned about. But will you propose an amendment to the energy bill calling for new measures to ensure local communities benefit from onshore wind farm? And then there's a specific example of how that could happen about community benefit. So that's really good because it's taken a massive issue. It's found an area where the politician and the candidate both care. So local benefits of local community benefit. It's framed it around that. It's made it specific. It's measurable. Have they or have they not put an amendment in? It's achievable because any MP can submit an amendment regardless of their political party. It's relevant. It's a really important issue at the moment as we expand local climate, local renewables. There's got to be some community benefit, and it's timed. It doesn't say by next week or by next month. But if you're asking them to submit an amendment on a bill, there's an established time frame that has to happen in. So once the bill goes through, if that amendment's there, they have done it. If the amendment's not there, they haven't done it. This politician was Jamie Stone, and he said yes to this. So he set out an amendment, but he also published a proposal at a local level. And because he'd been given that framing and that local mandate and all of those things that we've talked about, he could talk really confidently on the issue and make it really specific. So I hope that's a helpful example of how you can take an important issue and kind of smartify it. I'm not going to talk through these today, but again, these are just here for inspiration. If you're struggling to come up with a specific ask, these are some smart asks you can take to MPs in their different categories. So you've got ministers or PPSs, which is a parliamentary private secretary. That's basically an MP that supports a minister in their ministerial position. Ministers really can't go against the party line, so you have to work within that. You've got backbench MPs who actually have a lot more flexibility, so that's a really good opportunity there. And then you've got shadow ministers or shadow PPSs, so this would be the opposition front bench. So I'm not going to go through them then, but if you're struggling with coming up with good, smart questions, those are just some inspirations potentially. And equally, we've got some there for parliamentary candidates if you're trying to have that conversation too. This is not an exhaustive list. If anyone's got some ideas, please do put them in the chat. But yes. Right, I'm just going to look through. Is there any questions?
Yes, Alfie, there is a question about devolved nations, which I did, sorry, quite a long answer, but hopefully that kind of covers it. There's a few representatives from devolved nations here. Not food and farming, of course, is a devolved issue, and I've just said, obviously, the same principles apply in terms of elevator pitches, smart principles and things. Obviously, we would recommend you to engage with your local member of Scottish Parliament or member of Senedd in the same way. But obviously for this event, this is a Westminster MP event, and I like to think of them as bridges between Westminster and their devolved nation. And as I said, they will still raise things on your behalf in the various Westminster forums. So as I mentioned, a lot of Scottish MPs and Welsh MPs like to point to examples in Scotland and Welsh examples and for England to learn from, whether it's on school meals policy, for example. So they definitely want to get that information from local actors such as yourself and sort of raise it in parliamentary debates. And it can also help build you that bridge in connection with your local representatives from Senedd or Holyrood as well. But I don't know whether, Alfie, you had anything else to say on that, but it's a very good question.
I'll probably just do a short echo. These tools are absolutely applicable across the different techniques. Again, the event is MP specific, but I'd really encourage you, if you have the opportunity that is an additional elected representative, by all means, please engage with them. The other thing to say is just that MPs and MSPs or MSs do talk to each other. Sometimes not that publicly if they're different parties, but privately they do. Because they're all representing similar areas and they want to share knowledge and resource. So if you're having meetings with the MSP and the MP, and they're going, oh, this issue keeps popping up for us, and they go, oh, that issue keeps popping up for me too. Maybe we should do something about that. How can we support each other? Those conversations do happen, not all the time, but they do. Great. So this is called Pitch Perfect, this section, which is the name of the training. And it's about basically taking everything we've talked about today and framing it in a way that's a really compelling ask, a really compelling conversation if you bump into your MP at the event. So before you meet your local politician, you should have this kind of down, a plan of your pitch down, who you are and who you're representing. Hello, my name is Alfie. I'm here on behalf of this group and to talk to you about this issue. Focusing on positive solutions instead of demands and accusations. We're going to come to that in a second. Then bringing forward that smart ask, linking it to those co-benefits and that motivation that we've talked about, and concluding with a commitment and something memorable. You will probably be able to spot your MP at this event because you've done all this research and you're so linked in. And that's great, but they meet a lot of faces. So finding a way to stand out for them to remember you, so that when you do that follow-up email or they reach out to you, they know they remember who you are and that relationship is already established. So just a little bit around the demands and accusations. It can be really tempting to go in there and just go, what you've done is shameful. You haven't acted. I want to see more action. Please, I demand that you do that. And that can sound really powerful because it's compelling and it's loud and it's a big statement. But it doesn't always work, and it really doesn't work in these settings. In these settings, it's about having conversations, about building knowledge and consensus, not about making either side uncomfortable, even if you're really frustrated by the lack of action. So again, going back to those defensive and offensive behaviors, really trying to avoid them. But instead focusing on positive solutions. So this is a structure that can be really useful when thinking about developing your pitch. Observing, talking about feelings, talking about needs and values, and taking a request. So once you've introduced yourself and said who you're there for, who you're representing, maybe had a little conversation about whatever it is, starting with something that's fact, that's observation, something that the MP can't disagree with. So this is an example framed around insulation again, just to keep the theme. So an observation about the cost of energy with specific research details. That can't be controversial because it's true. And so you're starting with a truth. Moving to feelings, talking about why this issue matters to you as a person or the community that you're representing, what you're scared about, what you're concerned about, and why it matters. Needs and values, this is talking about what people need, what the solution is, and where the values stand. So in this example, it's vital that people can afford to heat their homes. You're putting across a value. I believe that it's vital people heat their homes. It's not a very controversial one, but it is a value. But we also need to limit the environmental impact of staying warm. So you're talking about the needs and values of what you care about. And then you would bring in that smart ask that you developed in your request. So based on what I've talked to you about here, politician, I've explained why it matters and all of those things. You've agreed with me probably on those 3 points. They can't disagree with you on the facts and the observations. They shouldn't dismiss your feelings. That is how you feel, regardless of if they agree with it or not. They can't really disagree with your values and your needs. They might have a different opinion, but they have to respect that that's how you stand. And then there's the request. So based on those things, will you do this thing? And that's where you can take that smart ask. If you want to write when you're there a bit notes on paper, that's not an issue at all. If it just helps you remember exactly what you want to say and you want to get your wording right. Some of you may find politicians not intimidating at all. Others of you might find them quite intimidating because of your personal experience or your understanding of politicians. So it can be quite a scary thing to have those conversations. So the more prepared you can feel for that interaction, the better. This is the slightly more complicated bit. It's great to be really prepared, but you've also got to have a conversation. You need to both be listening to what they're saying and taking it on board. And if you can, thinking about how you take those opinions and thoughts and link it to what you care about. So they might come back and say, yes, I hear what you're saying, but I'm really concerned about it because of this thing. And you can go, I really appreciate that. However, here's why it's important. So being flexible in the conversation, being rigid on what you care about and what you're asking for, absolutely. You don't need to change that, but flexible and meeting them where they are. And thinking again through that conversation, if you're learning new bits of information, what's motivating your local politician? What are they talking about? What do they keep taking the issue to? And how can you take that issue and reframe it for them in a way that's compelling? So discussing, listening, and adapting is really important. Using your pitch as a way to kickstart action. You want this pitch to be really compelling, but the action doesn't happen on the day. The action happens afterwards. So again, if you can leave that conversation with a turn of phrase that's quite memorable, or a bit of information about you that stands out, why you care about the issue, or have a conversation with a joke or a funny remark from either of you, that's really helpful, because then when you follow up in the email, you can go, hello, MP, it was great to meet you at the event, and this was who I was, just in case you forgot, including that little memorable element, so that you can then go and have the conversation. So they might respond in a huge variety of ways. They might be really positive, they might be kind of in the middle, they might be really negative. If they make a commitment on the day, if they say, absolutely, I'm going to engage more with this, I'm sorry that I haven't done so far, but I'm going to do more. Follow up with them straight after the event. When you get home that night, draft an email and say, thank you for your commitment, just to remind you what we talked about and the commitment you made. When can we meet again to discuss these things? If they're less keen to making a commitment that day, still try and leave with something. Say, can I send you some resources on this issue? Can we meet again in the constituency? Will you come along to this event we're putting on? So don't, it's not that you're not taking no for an answer, it's just that you're asking in a different way. So yeah, thinking about that. If you're really struggling, saying, look, can we please have a meeting in the local area to talk about this again? It's really hard for politicians to say to people, especially at an event like this, no, I don't want to talk to you again. And if they are doing that, then they're really not engaging with you. And that's when you might need to start talking to other people and bringing other people in, because that's them not respecting your time. Engaging with them on the issue, continuing to, and maybe going from different angles. So maybe going back to the drawing board and saying, okay, that common ground that I thought was really compelling didn't actually work with them. They actually weren't that passionate about farming, which I thought they were. That's okay. You can go back and do it again. This is the first meeting. It's not the only opportunity to meet with an MP. So just an encouragement there, that if it doesn't necessarily work out, that doesn't mean it's doomed. So that's just a summary of what we've done today. So the 4 kind of steps: researching your MP, finding that common ground, including co-benefits and motivations, developing that common ground into smart questions, smart asks that are based on that, but are really clear, and then using that to start a conversation. You might want to get in touch with your MP before the event, saying, I'm really looking forward to meeting you, and here's what I want to talk to you about. So you're both prepared for that conversation. And then the reason there's arrows there is because it's a loop. So you might need to do it again, but that's okay. So I'm just going to run through our support really quickly, and then we're going to take some questions from the chat. Is there anything you want to add at this point, Ollie?
No, I suppose I just wanted to say about the elevator pitches. It might feel, a bit quick fire and fast pace at the events. Some of the MPs have a bit of time, and they might sit down with you and they might go through some of the more granular details, but some of them, as MPs often are swept around and they're quite busy. So the elevator pitch is really key. And Alfie's points at the end, I was really nodding throughout, because trying to nail them down to a future meeting or a future site visit or something like that, in even discussing dates with them, what would work best for you, for example? Would it be me coming to your constituency office on a Friday? Maybe that could work. You could discuss dates that work in the next few weeks, or having a Zoom meeting on an available time. I just think it's really important to try and get that into your conversation if you can, because they might be very busy, but if you get something to follow up with, that's a really nice takeaway. And yeah, it's a really invaluable points there.
Yeah, someone mentioned earlier on the chat actually that they have regular office hours. A lot of MPs do have surgeries, so maybe going to the next surgery immediately after the event would be a positive move too. So just in terms of futures, ongoing support from Hope for the Future, a lot of our resources are online. We have a portal that we will share the links for to you. This is hosted by the Climate Village, which is basically a community of like-minded climate activists who share knowledge and experience. So it's a really powerful place to be a part of. You've attended this session. If you want more support from us, if you've got more questions, or you think you could benefit from support, please do fill out the form online or get in touch with me or Ollie, and we can help you there. Our support can range from helping you with the research bit, helping you with the smart asks bit, helping you to meet. If you're uncomfortable meeting an MP one-on-one after the event, we can be there in the room with you. If you're putting on an event, we can help you book a room, get the MP there, help organise those steps, help you draft an agenda. We can basically help with any part of the process. It's also all I do with my day. So if no one takes me up on it, I have very quiet days. So please do feel that support is available if you want it. We've got a couple of trainings coming up. We do a monthly training called Your Voice Heard, which is very similar to this, but maybe goes into a bit more detail if you'd like a refresher on any of it. And we do a drop-in clinic every month. The next one is on the 30th of May, which is just an open space to talk about any kind of questions and concerns. political engagement. But that's the only one more thing to add is the feedback. Please do fill out the feedback that Sustain send round. It is so helpful to us because it allows us to do training better. And even if you're positive or negative, it's really useful. And there'll be some questions there specific to this training, so please do fill that out. But yeah, that's the end of that. I'll just see if there's any more questions on the chat, but I'm not seeing any that Ollie hasn't got to. If there's any people who want to unmute themselves and ask a question, I guess we could stop the recording now and maybe do one or two of them. But if not, I think that's probably
yeah. Just I'll make a comment as well because it came up earlier on in the chat about parliamentary candidates. So obviously this event is for sitting MPs, just to be very clear. So obviously we're not having PPCs attend this event. However, we would encourage you to engage with PPCs in your area, whether that's inviting them to events or arranging meetings with them. Absolutely. And you know, you can almost in a way mention that you're doing that to your sitting MP because they're going to be very aware of who the PPCs are. So obviously if they are aware that you're meeting PPCs, they might pick them into action to meet you as well. So as is the way with politics. So yeah, just I wanted to mention that very briefly. And yeah, I can't see any, do speak up if there was anything we missed in the chat, but hopefully we've got to everything. But
No, I think everything's been covered. And yeah, as Ollie mentioned, there are other ways to engage candidates ahead of the election year. And we're actually looking at Sustain and how we can support the SFP network in the coming weeks and months around that as well. So you won't be alone. But yeah, if there aren't any more questions, we can bring this to a close. Oh,
just a very final quick comment as well. You know, it's quite a laid back event really in lots of ways. It really is just about schmoozing and small talking your MPs. I don't want you to go in thinking it's a scary situation. I mean, for example, last year, I'm not sure if Nancy's still on the call, but she came along and she got invited to a lovely wine reception by her MP afterwards on the balcony. It was just timed really well, and she went off to a Sussex wine reception, which I thought was quite good. So it's very fun. It's conversational, and you know, set up those future meetings, of course. But of course, like, don't feel intimidated that you have to get in, you know, lots of different things. Like, it is just a way of putting a name to a face, getting a name out there, and hopefully getting some useful points across as well. But just to reflect on that happened last year, so it's hopefully going to be really fun as well.
Can I add on that? I think I can't reiterate this enough. Last year's event, we had probably the biggest MP turnout to any event hosted by Sustain or Sustainable Food Places, and there was one key ingredient, and it was actually you guys. It was the food partnership representatives and coordinators, and MPs flocked to the event because they wanted to meet their constituents and their constituent representatives. So that is really what makes these events so successful, is that you guys are attending. So never forget that. They do want to meet you guys. They might be time poor. It might take quite a while to establish those relationships, but they do want to hear from you guys. Great. Well, I just want to say a huge thank you to Alfie from Hope for the Future for delivering the training today. We will be sharing the slides as well as the recording, and we will be incorporating some of the guides and advice points around putting together your elevator pitch into the supporting documents for coordinators and attendees for Day of Action. I also want to give a huge thank you to my colleagues Lily and Ollie. It's just another fantastic session full of useful information. So yeah, and thank you to everybody who's attended and put questions forward, and for all the lively discussion. We will, as per usual, we will be grabbing any links and any pointers, anything useful that's come up in the chat, and sharing that with everyone who registered as well. So look out for an email that will include, as Alfie said, a survey from us, and it will include a couple of questions from Hope for the Future. So please do take a moment when that comes through to fill it out. Thank you.